Hey everybody, Jeremy here from Whaaat Studios. I'm back again with another Grit Fantasy RPG video. Today's topic will be magic and how it works in the game. Now I'm just going to come out and say it. Grit Fantasy RPG does not have spells or a dedicated magic system. Now this may cause you to have a panic attack. You might be having heart palpitations and feel like your eyes are darting back and forth. This seems like such a terrible, terrible thing. But before you run away or do anything hasty, know that I've got you covered. Take a deep breath. Everything is going to be okay. All right. So when I designed Grit, not having spells was a very focused and deliberate design choice. I really spent a lot of time thinking about it, and it actually, Grit began with spells, but that was like 7 or 8 years ago. And probably about a year in, I decided to axe it and work on some other kind of concept for magic in the game, because I really do love magic, and I think it has a place in fantasy, obviously, but I didn't want to do spells. And there are a number of reasons for that I'll go over later. But one of the first things I want to kind of mention and bring this up again, because I've covered this in other videos, is that the concept of Grit is that it's minimal, it's quick, and it's designed specifically for one-shots and short arcs. And when I say that, I really mean that. I designed this game to shine in those types of games. It wasn't just like, oh, I've made this RPG. It would work great for, one-shots. No, it's like I set out specifically to make sure that this game ran really well with one-shots and games that or campaigns that are 3 or 4 sessions long. Also episode-based play and convention play as well. So keep that in mind as I discuss things further here. And then I realized when I was writing notes for this, that this can be a pretty loaded topic, and that I think it may require some future videos, like kind of pulling in some other people and having like a group discussion about it, because I think it's an interesting topic, and I think it's worth like kind of diving into a little bit more. And I don't want to get into that much depth today with this video. I want to kind of keep it on the shorter side if I can. So keep that in mind. I might put something out relating to this topic in the future. So one of the first things on my list that I wanted to talk about, and the reason why I did not put spells in the book, is because of simplicity. The whole concept of the game is simple, streamlined mechanics, things that a game that you don't really have rules that you have to look up or that are in play in the game that just kind of bog things down. And so first and foremost, it's simplicity. And kind of relating to that is maintaining fast combat. So for those of you who haven't played Grit or haven't read the book yet, rounds in the game happen very rapidly. It's not a D&D thing where there's initiative. It's very fluid, and the way that actions and reactions work, you can run through a whole round with multiple player game in 5 or 10 minutes. Whereas in something like D&D, I mean, you could easily go 20, 25, 30 minutes between your turns, Whereas with Grit, it could be 5 or 10 minutes or less. So, that's another consideration that I was looking at when I just decided not to do spells. And kind of the third thing I wanted to mention was, and a big one, is that it's a departure from D&D and games like it. I find that, I know it's not going to be a popular opinion, but I find that D&D has some serious power bloat issues, and that I think spells have a lot to do with it. I also think spells just in themselves are so complex and break so many of the core rules that they're harder to keep track of, and in turn just makes gameplay like so long, like especially combat scenarios. It's like you can't possibly keep all that information in your head. I'm sure there are some people that do, but for a normal person who is just starting out or who's newer to the game, knowing all those spells and what all the specifics of what they do is overwhelming and requires looking them up, and as you use them. So yeah, I just feel like D&D has done a disservice sort of to that idea of fluid, fast combat. I also think that the designers of D&D, especially the modern stuff, is that it's an additive process. So they just keep adding and adding and adding to it, and it just has become this web of interconnected rules that just sort of one thing balances off another, and there's exceptions and all this stuff that you have to worry about. Another thing too is that if you look at the spells in the book, the text and rules are just so long. Like, I actually did some research, and I looked at first thing I did is I looked at my basic D&D red box book from back in the day, and looked up the web spell. And that, I won't get into details or reading it off or anything, but that was like 2 paragraphs long, roughly, plus like a stat sort of thing where, described it as far as stats are concerned, or what you need, or duration and all that stuff. And the information in there wasn't very streamlined and kind of specific, and so it's very clunky. And then I looked at D&D 5e, and it's like 5 paragraphs. Mind you, a few of them are short, but still, it's a lot. And then I looked at Pathfinder, and that was like 7. So, yeah, so that's just too much. I didn't want to add that kind of stuff into my game. And I didn't want to add a system that kind of had to take up or balance out the power bloat and stuff that happens with spells. So I didn't want to add a level system or magic points or spell slots or any of that stuff. It just adds too much complexity for what I wanted. Now, if you look at some of the other minimal systems out there, the spells are quite minimally written. It's maybe a line or one paragraph, which isn't as bad. But I kind of was after something else here. So, and another thing that comes with this, another thing on my list, is just challenging the established norms of fantasy role-playing games. And I think this is what like a future video would do well with. But what I think is, and here's the question, is there any rule out there that says that I can't just not have spells in my game? It seems like D&D has kind of like set this precedent for every fantasy game kind of requiring the use of spells, especially on the character's end. So I want to challenge that. I think this the D&D model has kind of like created this familiarity and expectation that that's what you are going to have to deal with. Now, is taking spells out going to make the game less magical? I absolutely disagree, because I think Grit Fantasy is very magical. There's a lot of magical stuff going on in it. It's just that there are not spells. It's all about the objects. So that brings me to the 5th thing on my list, and that is focusing on magical objects. So in my notes in my rules noodling and thinking about the game when I was designing it, I really liked the idea of magical artifacts and just like how that physical connection to the world, the fantasy world, and how magic kind of flows through those things, creates this kind of cool story idea, or this cool background, or cool mechanical way that magic can enter the game. So that's what I did. I focused on artifacts. And there's a little blurb in the book I'm going to go over. I'm going to kind of go through the book a little bit shortly, that talks about this, that I really like this idea of an old age of mages and wizards that at one time had all these spells that they could conjure. They could do this freely because they knew the language of magic, and they knew how to read it and write it. But all those things over time just sort of got lost, and all that remains really are the artifacts they left behind. So the people that, or the characters that enter the game have these magical artifacts, but they have no real full concept of what the language of magic is. And another thing too is I really like the idea of true words for things. So there are true words that are used to like sort of activate these artifacts. And so some of the characters, the ones that are the heroes, right, kind of know some of these words. And that is why the command aspect is related to artifacts, especially ones that are like wands, staves, magical like shards and crystals. The more arcane, sort of fully magical focused artifacts. So I just think that's a really interesting approach, and it has worked out really, really well in all the testing and all the games that I played, and I haven't had any issues with people like thinking the game was not magical or that they couldn't do these really cool magical things. It's just a different way of doing it, okay? And number 6 on the list is just telling a different story. And so that just really relates to, the magical objects and how they sort of relate. It gives you a different way of telling the story of magic in your games. So I challenge you to sort of push that, and don't think of the loss of not having spells. Think of what you gain by using magical artifacts in your games. It's a trade-off. It's not a loss. It's something else, and embrace it. Okay? So I'm going to move ahead here and kind of just poke through the rule book a little bit and just show you some things that I think you would think interesting that relates to this topic. And the first thing I want to kind of like dive into is what's available for the lineages, because some of the abilities really relate to magic stuff. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of scroll down to the lineage section and start with the elf, because the elf is inherently like a magical being, right? And they have this really cool ability called the mystical aura that relates directly to magical items, artifacts. So it reads, after making a command roll, you may use any number of focus dice to boost that roll. Now on the surface that may look like, not really a big deal, but when you consider artifacts, especially the more arcane ones, requiring command to activate, you could see that the elf could be a very powerful wizardly type lineage to play. Another thing that I do want to add is that in Grit Fantasy, for those who haven't read it yet, there are no classes and there are no level systems. There's not even milestones. And there's no like monetary system. So there's no way to, there are no wizard or magic user classes. There are not level-based systems in this book at all. So having spell levels does not make any sense. And yeah, so it just makes sense that artifacts would naturally fit into this kind of setup, right? Okay, so another one I'd like to go to is like a lot of these could be considered magical, but the gnome is one that I want to mention as well, simply because they are connected to gadgets. So their ability is signature gadget. You start with an extra gear item, roll for an artifact on the gadgets and gizmos table. So what that does is you just start with a extra item, and that item is magical. Every single thing on that list has some kind of magical property. So they're an artifactor. You may not be able to call them a wizard per se, but they use these magical items and they're good at it. So another one too, which may not be as obvious, is the Quickling. So their ability is swift move. So they can sacrifice a focus die to immediately take a second action or reaction. So to me, this is like a speed spell, right? Like they could double their actions basically for the round. And to me, that's inherently magical. Yeah, the other ones, not so much, the remaining ones here, but I'm going to kind of scroll down into the unique items, actually. And that is going to be page 32 in the book. When you build a character, you are able to choose one of these unique items on the D20 list. You can also roll for it if you like. But pretty much everything on this list has some magical property, right? So if you go to the first one, Amulet of Illusions, you can create an illusion that's melee radius within long range. That produces no sound, but it's a hard insight roll to discern. Super fast, easy to use, and it's magical, right? Another one, too, that's really popular are the arcane fragments. That's number 2 on the list. So these are single-use items, but it includes one crystal shard of earth, fire, and wind. When activated, choose the elemental effect that will occur within short range. So what that does is it gives you this creative freedom to come up with whatever you want for whatever effect is going to happen with these. So if you use that fire shard or fire fragment, you could make that a fireball. You could make that a wall of flame. You could make that a ring of fire that goes around you, protects yourself or your allies. It could be any number of things. So I really like that kind of open freedom that these things give you. But they still have the feel of a spell. Okay. Another one, Belt of Potions. It's just it's a nice belt, but you get 3 potions that have magical properties. Another one right underneath it, Coat of Blades. On the surface, it looks like just a normal coat, but it holds an unlimited number of throwing knives. So that's kind of magical in my opinion. Another one too that's very close to the arcane fragments is the one that's called Druidic Runes. So very much like what I had mentioned, it includes 1 rune of stone, water, and wood. When activated, choose the magical effect that will occur in short range. So again, this is a very spell-based item. You can have that creative freedom to control water. Maybe you grow like a tree out of this thing, or maybe you create a wooden weapon if you are missing a weapon. Like, who knows what that can be. But it just allows you that freedom. There's Elvish Boots, Fey Forged Mail, Gnomish Boomsticks, which are basically bombs, but those are magical. Luck runes, rune metal armor, spyglass of Eversea that allows you to see through cover in solid objects. The vine staff, any kind of staff is magical, right? Like think of Merlin and Gandalf. This one just allows you to summon a massive vines at short range. So it's just, there's no shortage of magic here when you look at it. And this is, from the get-go, you can start with your character with this. And because there's no classes, you're free to kind of make these characters any way you like and play any way you like. You're not like funneled into any kind of class where you can't do magical things, right? So I really like that freedom. And going into basic gear here too is another thing, where on the surface you may not really think of this as magical, but like look at number 6 on page 34. Fireworks. 1 round fuse distracts, last 1 round, it's loud. So like that can be a magical type thing that happens, right? It's just called fireworks. And like moonberry juice, just a potion that instantly heals D4 grit. Yeah, that's magical. Rogue's cloak, stealth rolls are easy. Smoke bombs, stink bombs, tasty biscuits. It goes on and on here. So, just looking at this with a little different eye, you can tell that I've put in some effects and stuff here that can be seen as sort of magical in the way that they operate mechanically in the game. With that said, I want to move to the loot tables, and that's going to be on starts on page 109. But as you can see, there's quite a few of these. There's 20 D20 tables. 12 of those tables are just genuine magical artifacts. The other ones, there's gear items. Some of those are magical, and there's consumable items, and quite a number of those are magical as well. But in this next page, this is what I was referencing before. There's this little blurb, okay? It says, "Long ago, there were wise sorcerers who knew the ancient language of magic. So great was their power, they could conjure spells and shape them at will. Alas, there are none in this age who can cast spells, for not enough is left of the ancient words and writing to make it so. True wizardry is gone forever. Now only artifacts remain, arcane objects imbued with ancient spells. We are the relic wielders, the mages of our time." And that's from a journal entry from Master Ranelin Rylas. He was a NPC in one of the first games that I ran of Grit, long time ago. Okay, so gear items, first 2 are, and I've gone through these with other videos. First 2 are just basic stuff. Uncommon items have some magical properties. They're just like higher quality basic items. But they don't really get more magical until you hit these unusual objects. And they're just all of these have some kind of magical property. Like, let's see, the bronze amulet, number 2, has an intricately carved symbol that continually changes shape. Like, these are put in here to give you like interesting role-playing moments in your game. These are things that characters or players can use to like create these interesting situations. Okay, so who knows how this would play out. Another one, and I think this one has been used in a game recently, called the Elven Warrior Doll. Excuse me. It's wooden. Sometimes it speaks, but only you can hear it. What is it saying? Is it for good? Is it for ill? Who knows? There are these interesting, cool things. How about the Jade Arrowhead, number 10? Warm to the touch and always points towards your home. Not a spell, definitely magical. Okay, so I love these items. They're great. Okay, and then we go into consumables, and these are just single-use items. Use it, and they're gone. Curious goods, there's a lot of things in here that just provide these sort of magical, somewhat magical things to happen. Like instantly repairs and restores an ordinary wooden object or item. That's Dryad Moss. Itch Powder. Meadow Shade, which is a poison. That's more of a poison, but less magical. How about Monkeypox? Applied to the feet. Walk on any surface. So that could be a spell, but it's an item. So you can see there's a pattern I'm showing you here. Okay, food items, all of these things do kind of interesting, weird, magical type things. I'm not going to get into details. Handy devices as well. They can provide some things that are magic-like sparkle cones, short radius, dazzling display for D4 rounds, stench bombs, thunder socks, teleportation trap. These are all cool spell-like things, right? Magic potions speak for themselves. They're all magical, all do interesting things that are useful in game. And then after that, we get kind of into the true artifact, which are the focused magical items. Now, they have a little bit more going on as far as what's written, but none of them are more than 2 lines of 6x9 size paper, right? So I want to go down to books and scrolls, which are more wizardly. They are going to require insight or command to use. So, you have like the Runic Book Bomb, right? That's an insight roll. Set a 1 to 4 round fuse, explosive vortex of paper cutting pages. It blinds the targets. All happens within long range. Another one with the elemental thing. Scroll of Elements. Choose fire, earth, air, or water. Describe the chosen elemental effect that will occur within short range. This is a one and done thing because it's a scroll, right? Yes, so it just goes on and on with that. Tome of Impy Imp. Gain +1 to an aspect that does not have a positive value. It crumbles into a pile of imp bones. You develop strange impish tendencies. Tome of Light. I think I brought that up before in one of my other videos. Then going down to crystals and runes. These are all command. Most all of them are command-based items if they're not just single-use items. Like rune bolts, number 10. That's a very magical one. Fires a long-range bolt of elemental energy that deals D6 unsoakable damage. Are those not lightning bolts? See what I'm getting at here? See? Okay. Yeah, this just goes on and on. Another one is instruments and oddities. These are what I would say would be more of like a bard item, right? Because they're instruments. It's like Drum of Sparks. Creates a sparking cone-shaped cloud that extends to short range. Obscures vision, ignites flammables, and lasts 1 round. See, very, very spell-like magic. So, yeah, I can go into all the details all day long here, but you kind of get the point. I've got amulets. Those are also a very mage, wizardly type thing that, anyone can use, really. And then there's some staves and wands. Of course, again, Merlin or Gandalf. Who doesn't have a wand? What about Harry Potter? All that's all magic stuff. And I would argue, with these characters in pop culture and movies and books, is it really them that are doing the spells? Or do they really need that wand or staff to make it happen? Think about that. All right, I think I'm going to stop there with all that stuff. And I'm going to just kind of wrap it up here. I'm going to say that, I've sort of made my point and showed you that, my ideas, my design process, and kind of why I choose to take out spells. And I think it's a good one. And I think Grit works very well. And again, I have not had any issues. It has been just a magical based game that doesn't have spells. So I would urge you all out there who are considering like adding something to this or putting in a spell system, please play the game multiple times before passing any kind of judgment or thinking that you need to fix it, because it really doesn't need fixing. And again, it goes back to that simplistic game style, the quick combat. I think it's so easy to just add stuff and make things complex than it is to keep things simple, or to create things that move in the direction of simplicity. So again, make sure you play it, give it its fair chance, and see how it goes, okay? And I think I'll just stop there, and I will say thank you for stopping by and watching this video. Thank you for watching my other videos if you've done so. And if you're out there gaming, have fun and take care of yourself and roll those dice. Hey everybody, Jeremy here from Whaaat Studios. I'm back again with another Grit Fantasy.